Almost every single prehistoric technology for almost 3.5 million years was focused on food. It did something with food. The answers that I've been searching for decades for my own health, I actually already had the answers to, or at least knew where to find those answers. And it wasn't in the Muslim Fitness magazine or the latest nutritionist that was, yelling something online. It was actually in the past. When you control the food, you control literally everything. There's no evidence of organized warfare before the agriculture revolution. You didn't need it. At this point, I've realized the power of traditional ancestral approaches to food and how it transformed my health and my family's health. And my wife and I were committed. We're like, we are going to create a space where we can teach people to cook like this at home, and we can actually make the food for the community as well. Our focus, our mission here with the kitchen, with the restaurant, is to transform familiar food into its most nourishing form possible.
Welcome, my friends, to Kiltz's Keto and Carnivore Conversations. Today, I am honored to be joined by a man who doesn't just study history, he lives it. Dr. Bill Schindler is an experimental archaeologist, a professional chef, the author of the groundbreaking book, Eat Like a Human. Bill has traveled the globe from the plains of Africa to the mountains of Peru, learning from indigenous cultures and master artisans to uncover the dietary secrets that fueled human evolution for 3.5 million years. He is the founder of the modern Stone Age kitchen and a former professor who believes that while we have the bodies of our ancestors, we are living in a world of dead food. Today, we are going to dive into why the how of food preparation is just as important as the what, and how we can reclaim our health by returning to our ancestral roots. Well, Bill, welcome to our show. We're talking about food and human health. And I'm a carnivore, and I started in the keto world. And before that, I was in the paleo and then the standard world. And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you managed to go from professor, archaeologist, anthropologist, to now you're a chef and running your own food kitchen.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation tonight. It's been a really long journey. I think it's very much like so many other people's journey, where it has all been, well, first of all, it wasn't a straight line at all, but every time I made a turn or a switch or a change, the focus, the reason, the impetus behind that was because there was something about my health that I was trying to overcome, some sort of an issue, whether, and depending on what period it was in my life, it was many different things, but I was very heavy as a kid until I was an athlete in high school, and I wrestled all through high school and through college. I wrestled for Ohio State in the early 90s in the College of New Jersey as well. And I grew up, I was born in 1973. I just turned 53 years old. My entire life, the first 3 decades of my life, and very hard to feed me as healthy as they could. They were listening to everything that they were being told, right? They, no eggs, only egg whites, eggs out of a box, 1 egg a month, 2 eggs a week. It changed all the time. Margarine, not butter. And we all know what this was. I went from this one incredibly unhealthy relationship with food. Food when I was heavy was something that made me look a certain way, to another incredibly unhealthy relationship with food when I was wrestling. I was losing, when I was at Ohio State, I was cutting 22 pounds in a day and a half every single week. I wrestled 158 pounds on Friday. Every Friday I weighed in 158 pounds. And then by Wednesday I was back up to 180, and then 158 pounds and then back up to 180. And through this entire time, I had access to some of the best nutritionists in the world. We had incredible people surrounding us, and the budget at Ohio State was immense. We had all these people telling us what we should and shouldn't be doing, and it was horrible information. And then when I stopped wrestling, all this weight poured back on because I wasn't working out so hard, and all sorts of other metabolic issues followed right in its path. And I was just this overweight, middle-aged guy that had horrible health and was sick all the time. My digestive tract was screwed up. So my entire life, I'm trying to figure out what I should be eating. I don't know why I thought I should do this, but I remember especially in the late 80s and early 90s, every month when the Muscle and Fitness magazine came out, I'd pour through it and think that was where my dietary advice should come from. These 300-pound bodybuilders. But I was following all these diets. My weight would fluctuate. My health would fluctuate. And this entire time, my entire life, I've been very interested in the past, very, very, very interested in the past. And I was a history teacher at high school for a year. Then I went back, got my PhD in archaeology and anthropology. My focus was on very old ancestral technologies. And I mean, when I say old, I mean millions of years old. And there was a moment in my married life, my wife, Christina, we married 25 years. Early on, when I was really focused on these ancestral technologies and my approach to archaeology, I did a lot of field archaeology, but the main thing that I was focused on was something called experimental archaeology, where I was trained by some of the best people in the world, best primitive technologists, and all sorts of primitive technologies. So I had a lot of hands-on experience with replicating stone tools and prehistoric ceramics and hide tanning and all these things. And it was part of my research. But in order to become competent in stone tool technology, I dedicated myself every single day for years on end, every day, at least an hour practicing making stone tools. And I know for some people that sounds really, really weird, but I would sit in the garage and I'd make these stone tools and practice all these different technologies from different time periods. And at one night, I was in the garage. You can't do this inside. When you hit the rock and break off flakes, you create a lot of dust, and the dust is really, little microscopic razor blades. And so you have to do it outside. So I'm in the garage and I'm banging on these rocks. My wife comes outside. We 3 kids at the time, and one of them was an infant. And she's like, listen, you got to bring this inside. Like, get inside. And I'm like, I can't bring this inside. Like, the rocks and the dust, and you can't do it. No, she goes, no, not that. Keep that in the garage. This passion that you have for something, like, you got to make it relevant to our family. Like, you got it. Why be this passionate and this excited and this knowledgeable about something if it's not going to help your family in any way? Like, you got to bring it inside. I'm dealing with 3 kids by myself in here. I forget the exact conversation, but it was similar to that. And she was 100% right. But I'm thinking, how do I make stone tools relevant to my family? That's kind of weird. So in the shower, thinking day after day after day after day, and finally it hit me. And every part of my life, including my health, my family's health, and the health of the community now, because of this restaurant, changed because of this light bulb moment. I realized in the shower that day that almost every single prehistoric technology for almost 3.5 million years was focused on food. It did something with food. It either helped our ancestors get food, it helped them process food, it helped them cook food, it helped them share food, it helped them distribute food, it helped them do something with food. And we all know that our dietary changes over time for millions of years greatly impacted our evolutionary track. In fact, we are here as humans because of our dietary changes. But when I made that realization that the link between technology and our diets was that close, that I then realized that the link between technology and our evolution was that intricately intertwined as well. And what I realized was in that shower, the answers that I've been searching for decades for my own health, I actually already had the answers to, or at least knew where to find those answers. And it wasn't in the Muscle and Fitness magazine or the latest nutritionist that was, yelling something online. It was actually in the past. And when I looked to the past and looked at the ancestral dietary changes over time, transform my health, transform my family's health, and is the reason we have the restaurant now.
All right. If you're not a member of the Mighty Tribe yet, you must, right? Just go to Kiltz's Mighty Tribe and become a member. It's free. The whole intention is to bring the community of all humans to learn why this is better than this. And we invite all vegans and vegetarians, Mediterraneans, and carnivarians to Kiltz's Mighty Tribe. It's a meetup. It's a place to learn while you've been suffering likely from this, and you'll feel better on this. But what are the nuances of what you can do to feel better, look better, and live better? Because I've done it, and that's why I created the Mighty Tribe, to bring you into the masterclass. Be the master, my friends, and join Kiltz's Mighty Tribe. God bless. You're interested in something from history to archaeology, and then recognizing that it's not just something to teach others, it's something that we need to live in order to really explore how and why. Because part of it is why, and this is where, why did we, and I have this idea, we came out of the trees At some point when, I don't know how long ago it was, to eat the grass eaters and not the grass. Now, obviously, it wasn't like we jumped down, we started eating the animals and we're fine. There's this transition from being one thing into another. When did we become, how long ago did we become the human animal that focused primarily in eating animals?
That's a fantastic question. So the first thing you mentioned was coming out of the trees. We came down out of the trees somewhere between 5 to 7 million years ago. And when we came out of the trees is the first time, well, we were able to come out of the trees, but we were able to be more comfortable bipedal on two legs than we were hanging around, swinging around in trees. Now, even though we came out of the trees somewhere between 5 and 7 million years ago, which is an interesting point about that moment is there was a evolutionary tree branched then, and one line ended up becoming modern day chimpanzees and one line ended up becoming us through a bunch of different changes in species and all these things. But that's that moment. Even though we came out of we're able to be more comfortable on two legs, we still spent, we think, there are nights up in the trees because we had no way to defend ourselves. And it was much safer to sleep in the trees than it was to stay on the ground. So for millions of years, and we'll come back to that in a second, we spent days on the ground and our nights up back in the trees. But here's something very, very cool. This is Australopithecus afarensis. This is Lucy. If you've ever heard of Lucy, she dates to about 3.6 million years ago. This is the most complete Australopithecus afarensis fossil ever found. She was upright, so 3.5 million years ago, 1.5 million years walking around more comfortable on two legs and doing other things. But her diet, they had no tools whatsoever. Her diet was entirely what they could get with their hands and their fingers and their teeth and no processing at all, literally grabbing it and putting it in their mouth, grabbing it and putting it in their mouth. So a very limited diet. It was a little bit of fruit, a little bit of vegetables, and all of it was hyper-local, hyper-seasonal by default, and only those plants that had a low enough toxin that they wouldn't get sick or hurt themselves if they ate them, and a massive amount of bugs, When we think about the resource that animals are for us today, we can eat animals all year round, right? You can access to meat all year round. You can only eat certain plants at certain times, right? Bugs were that resource for them. It was the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable, year-round resource for them. And they did fine. They were about 3.5 feet tall, and their brains were about the third the size of ours. Now, what happened at 3.3 million years ago, we actually have, this is a resin cast. The museum in Nairobi, the National Museum of Kenya, made this cast for me. This is called the Lemekwe tool. This tool was found just west of Lake Turkana in Kenya, and it dates to 3.3 million years ago. To date, it's the oldest tool ever found. It was struck right in this spot directly, actually at that angle in this spot, and this pops off. And it doesn't look like much, but it's 3.5 million years old, so it doesn't look like much. It is razor sharp, or it was razor sharp, and it was sharper and more durable than anything they had on their bodies. And it transformed everything about our diets from moment forward. Because think about this, they were eating plants, they were eating bugs, and they were watching all these animals, all these predators on the savannah take down animals. And when a predator on the savannah takes down an animal, they take it down. They do not sit there and gnaw on the shoulder. They take it down, they rip it open, they gorge themselves in the blood, the fat, and the organs until they're full. They go off and digest that meal, and there is a massive animal dead, covered in flesh. That all these animals that are perfectly designed to be scavengers, but nowadays it's like buzzards and hyenas, their ancestors. Right. You know, they come in and, well, we weren't designed to do any of that. We don't have the anatomy to go in there and rip huge hunks of flesh off with our nails or our teeth, but they could with this. And as soon as this tool's made, we start finding bones of scavenged animals with butchering marks on them. So we know they were going down there and they were hacking off large pieces of meat. They weren't hunting at 3.3 million years ago, but they were starting to eat flesh, scavenged flesh that they got with these tools. And I don't want somebody listening to this thinking it's a minimized thing. Oh, they had a little bit here, a little bit there. No, we're talking about massive animals with a massive amount of meat on them that they could go out and literally, it's like a buffet, dine on until that, saber-toothed cat comes back. So to answer your question, we started eating animals about almost 3.5 million years ago, 3.4 million years ago. And for 1.5 million years, the meat in our diets came from scavenged animals. What changes is about 2 million years ago, we start hunting. And when we start hunting, everything changes. One of the things that changes is we don't have to wait for a saber-toothed cat to take down another animal. We can actually take an animal down at will. And we've seen this. We have evidence all over the place where we're making hunting implements or driving animals off of cliffs, doing also. In fact, our ancestors, in this case, we have Neanderthals. We think it's Neanderthals that actually completely devastated and made a whole species of elephant go extinct because they overhunted them. Like, we were good hunters. Not only could we take an animal down at will, but most importantly, I am convinced that this is the key that unlocked our massive body and brain growth. When we take an animal down at will and we're the predator, we have first access to the entire animal. We can eat the entire thing. We're not left with a little bit of whatever flesh that's there to consume. We can eat the blood, the fat, the organs, and the flesh. We can have the entire thing. And what's cool is that 2 million years ago, when this happens, we see the biggest jump in body and brain size we see throughout our evolutionary past, to almost modern proportions in the Homo erectus.
So this is 1.5 million years ago?
About 2 million.
2 million years ago. And in the change in what we were consuming, that sped up our ability to create new methods, new technologies, new and different tools? Or is that when we started changing and manipulating the food that we ate to either make it more palatable and or last longer?
That's such a great question. First off, I did make an error in something that I said. At almost 2 million years ago, it was Homo erectus. It wasn't Neanderthals on up here until about 300,000 years ago. It was Homo erectus that made that species of elephant go extinct. To fully answer that question, it's great. If we divide, and I'm not doing this artificially, this is actually a really good and clear natural division in our food resources. If we take animal-based resources and put them in this category over here, and we take plant-based resources and put them in this category over here, and we look at the technologies our ancestors had to develop to access the nutrients in those foods, there's a clear distinction. Almost every single technology created to access animals allows us to overcome our physical limitations and get the animal, right? It's things like spears and atlatls and boomerangs and throwing sticks and nets and traps and boomerang or bows and all these things, right? To actually get the animal. Once you have the animal, you don't need anything but a sharp edge. Like, you don't even have to cook it, and you have almost full access to all the nutrients that are inside of that animal. And it's an incredibly safe resource. You don't have to detoxify the animal. You can just literally start eating. Plants are completely different. Now, forget the agriculture revolution. Now, forget farming for a minute, because that's only about 12 to 15,000 years old. We have been eating plants for millions of years before we started eating animals. We may eat plants the entire time, but it's all collective foraging, right? Other than farming, there's not much technological need to get the plants. Maybe a digging stick, but other than that, maybe a sharp edge. But you're literally collective foraging. You're pulling leaves here. You're picking fruit. You're doing, that sort of thing. Maybe digging a few roots. The major technological input for plants comes after you have the plant, because you have a resource there that is protected by a massive amount of toxins. And when it does have nutrients, they're very difficult for the human body to access. So almost all the technological innovations for including plants in our diets over time are not about getting the plant. It's to detoxify the plant and make those nutrients available to our bodies.
Why would we want to eat the plant if we had plenty of animals? Or did a time come when it's like, okay, we don't have so many animals and we got to figure something else out?
I think about Anthony Chafee all the time when people ask me a question like that, because, one of the things that I've dove deep on for 30 years of my research is traditional ways of detoxifying plants and making the nutrients in the plants bioavailable. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. So I'll go off on these rants. You could do this, and you could take this, and you can ferment it, then you can do this, and you can sprout it. And he looks at me and goes, why the hell do you even, why? Like, I don't understand. And I get that. I completely understand where he's coming from. I do think it's very difficult to talk about the past without generalizing and overlooking a massive amount of diversity, and
Yes, yeah.
both in technology and in ritual and tradition and environments and all sorts of things, both in time and in place. So I'm confident there were times when animal resources were scarce. There had to be. So, animals migrate. That's part of it, right? So a lot of animal migration, whether it's fish or birds or whether they're mammals, there's a lot of migrations that are taking place. Maybe there's other reasons why you couldn't access animals. So plants filled that gap. There's no evidence. There is no evidence ever in the prehistoric record where anybody has decided not to stop eating animals. There's evidence to stop eating plants. I mean, we see it in the Arctic, right? People go to the Arctic where it's incredibly difficult to live, and if they're eating plants, they're eating plants for a couple weeks out of the entire year, and the rest of the time they're not eating any whatsoever. I don't have a direct answer to that, except to say, and I am very animal based in all of my eating. I mean, high quality animal fat and high quality animal flesh and organs are the primary parts of my diet. And for most of the time, it's all that I eat. But I do sometimes eat plants. And I know for some people this is taboo or whatever, but for some people they do as well. The reason I eat plants is because there's some that I just enjoy. Now I'm very selective about the plants that I consume, and there's some that I would never eat, and the ones that I do eat, I process in certain ways to ensure that they're safe and nourishing as they can be. But there's some that I just enjoy the texture or the flavor of. And I'm confident that there could be that in the past as well.
Well, I imagine we're a little more like a bear, an omnivore, that at the right time of the season when the berries were ripe and whatever else was there, berries and bugs, because a lot of these bugs store a lot of fat also for their winter, either hibernation or migration. And so we become hyperphagic in the environment of the ripe fruit and whatever else that is not in the animal based. And I'm wondering if really what we're seeing today is not pathologic, but physiologic and biologic. Our hyperphagia, because of our access to sweet foods that are easy to consume, are just part of your brain saying, here's the thing that was there in a short time to get you fat, but your brain doesn't know tomorrow. And so my theory is getting fat and being fat is not pathologic. And insulin is strictly doing the job it's been taught to do, which is get you fat. And because fat is survival and skinny is deadly. And so did we, when the time was there were plenty of animals, but there was still the ripe fruit, we ate as much as we could in that time. Is that how we lived, do you think? Or we said, I don't need those anymore. I saw these plants, or the environment we're in, when they saw the ripe fruit and the honey, we ate it like the bears.
So I want to say this one thing about plants because I think it helps relay very easily. I think when ripe fruits are available, they were consumed, especially overripe fruits. And I'll tell you something very quickly with this. But as far as plants are concerned, and I'm fully in line with Anthony Chaffee and all the other people that believe all plants are toxic at some level. I completely agree with that. Now, some of these toxins won't harm us much. Some of them will kill us outright, or if you eat the wrong mushroom, like your liver and your kidneys will shut down and you wish you were dead, like really, really bad, one dose. I think the most dangerous toxins in plants are things like oxalates, which build up over time and wreak havoc. We don't realize they're harming us until months or years down the road when you have this massive buildup. The plant toxins that are there also, we use in a lot of different ways. In some doses, we use them as spices. I mean, cinnamon is a plant toxin. It's a fungicide and an insecticide to keep the tree alive. And in a small dose, we enjoy it with our Christmas time. But in larger doses, we use it as medicines. And in much higher doses, it can land you in the hospital. So some of this but all plants have some level of toxin in them. The different plants, different toxins, different levels of toxins, many of them we can figure out, our ancestors have figured out some way of at least mitigating some of the effects of some of these toxins. And a lot of times it's very hard work. But one thing to think about very generally about with plants is that it costs the plant energy to protect itself. So they do it as a survival. They don't hate us, right? They're doing it as a survival mechanism to do the one thing that every species on this planet must do: reproduce viable offspring. That is the one thing we must do at a species level, or else we go extinct. So that the different parts of plants have different levels of toxins depending on the importance of that plant and the role that they play. So things like underground storage organs, roots and corms and tubers are generally incredibly toxic, especially in things like potatoes, because the plant spends all year, putting all the starch into this so it can live off of that when it's not engaged in photosynthesis during the winter and that sort of thing. So it's very, very toxic. Leaves and stems and things, depending on the season and the plant, can vary in toxins. Flowers are one of the few parts of the plant that the plant attracts, wants to attract something to. So they're usually beautiful, they usually smell good, they usually taste good, and they're usually very low or have no toxins in them whatsoever because of the role that they play in the plant. Ripe fruits are inherently, in most cases, very, very safe. The role of a ripe fruit is to attract an animal to eat a mature seed, so that mature seed takes a trip down the digestive tract of that animal and lands in a pile of manure. It's a great way to propagate the species. But for as incredibly safe from a toxin level as a ripe fruit is, a unripe fruit is almost very, very toxic. The role of a ripe fruit is to attract. The role of an unripe fruit is to deter, because it is suicide for that plant, all the plant's babies, right? All the seeds, if something eats it before the seeds are mature. So even something, I know tomatoes are part of part of a very dangerous family anyhow, but there's an added toxin in a green tomato called tomatine. So a green tomato is a much more toxic than a ripe tomato is. And that toxin turns off when that particular toxin turns off when that tomato becomes ripe. Seeds themselves are usually inherently incredibly toxic. We have a plant around here that's native called the pawpaw. It's George Washington's favorite dessert. And when I say pawpaw, I don't mean a papaya. I know sometimes we call papaya. Yeah. But this pawpaw is a native fruit to this area. It's in the banana family. It tastes like apricot custard. It's absolutely delicious. One of my favorite fruits when it's fully ripe. George Washington ate a chilled pawpaw every night during the season, during pawpaw season as dessert. Unripe, it has a powerful neurotoxin in it. Powerful. And it's actually, even in the ripe version, it still is sometimes there in the skin, and it's always there in the seeds. And I could tell you horror stories, even in ripe pawpaw, about that, because that toxin load. So number one, the reason I said all that was just to frame plants and toxins, but a ripe fruit is typically very low in toxins or has no toxins because of the role that it plays. But here's a really cool thing. Have you heard of the drunken monkey hypothesis?
I have not.
Okay. So the drunken monkey hypothesis. Now remember, we're not talking about bananas and gala apples here tens of thousands of years ago or hundreds of thousands of years ago. We're talking about wild plants, which are inherently more toxic. The fruits themselves usually have less sugar. More toxins, are typically very bitter, which is a very good sign of the toxin level, and has very little flesh in most cases compared to the modern versions, which are bred for a mass amount of sugar and very easy to access flesh. So the drunken monkey hypothesis was put forth by an anthropologist at University of California, Berkeley, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Years ago, I was asking, you mentioned this earlier, why are we drawn to as humans? Like, why is that a thing? It doesn't make any evolutionary sense right now in today's context because we have so much access to sugar. But in the past, when we didn't have so much access to sugar, one of the answers I heard was there's nothing that's sweet in nature that's toxic. Now, I don't know if that's true, but if it's not true, it's very close to being true. The drunken monkey hypothesis takes it a step further. Now, first off, it says all mammals are naturally drawn to alcohol. This is what this hypothesis suggests, at least. And if you want to Google or go on YouTube and look at drunken monkey, it's so hilarious to see. A giraffe is a goofy looking thing anyhow, but a drunk giraffe is hilarious. And they eat these fruits. These fruits fall. They're covered in wild yeast, and it exposes that sugar. They start fermenting. Well, the theory is and that these wild fruits are so many of them are so incredibly toxic that it's one thing to try to guess if it's ripe or not and eat it, but it's very, very safe to wait till it starts to ferment, because by the time it started to ferment, it's safe, at least from a toxin level, and then you could safely consume them. Maybe you get a little bit of buzz from it as well. But it's very interesting to frame some of these things in that way, to say, okay, sweet things are inherently safe from a toxin load, but if it starts to ferment, it's safe, and then maybe that's one of the reasons we're drawn to alcohol as well. It's interesting.
Well, that's very important, because again, our eating habits, everyone says, well, you're addicted to it. Well, you're not. Mm-hmm. You're physiologically searching for it because it was likely the least toxic and it provided you with the thing you needed. And I think that's really, really important. Did the plants domesticate humans in some way, or we're all just co-domesticated in this world? I mean, we're all co-evolving. It isn't as if, one organism's doing this. We're doing it together. It's the evolutionary biological soup of creation.
Have you read Botany and Desire by Michael?
Yes.
I mean, that's brilliant. The whole idea is brilliant.
So when did we, because, today we don't have to go foraging or think about where we're going to get food very much, because it's already provided. Right. When did we go from, hey, we have to continue to hunt and gather and prepare our food, to now something's happened that isn't natural, where it's someone else is doing it all for you?
I think there's 4 or 5 major steps in our ancestral dietary past. We talked about 2 of them already. So at almost, I'm just going to generalize here, 3.5 million years ago, we introduced flesh into our diet. We started eating meat. At 2 million years ago, we started hunting, and we introduced the entire animal into our diet. From 2 million years ago until about 12 to 15,000 years ago, we just got better at everything we did. We got better at accessing animals. We got better at hunting and trapping and fishing and clamming and crabbing and doing all those things. We got better at detoxifying plants. We got better at doing all of those things. Our brains and our bodies were skyrocketing. And just to throw it out there very quickly, our brain represents 2% of our body, but requires 20% of the nutrition we take in on a daily basis to feed, to nourish it. Right. So when I talk about these important changes in our diet, they were massively important, because we weren't keeping the status quo. We were getting bigger, and our brains were getting massive. They were exponentially growing, because in part that growth was supported by massive dietary change, an influx of not only a massive amount of nutrition, but the right kind of nutrition. When we get to about 12 to 15,000 years ago, that's when we start farming, and everything changes. So the agricultural revolution, we also call it the Neolithic revolution. Neolithic means new Stone Age. The reason we call the agricultural revolution and the Neolithic revolution the same thing is because our toolkits change immediately. We're not out there, making arrowheads and putting our spearheads or, atlatl dart heads or anything like this. We're sitting there making big, massive mortars and metates to grind grains and do these kinds of things, because our food base changes, right? We're now in everywhere we see the agricultural revolution, everywhere it's based on annual grasses, whether it's rice in Southeast Asia, or it's maize in the Americas, or it's oats and wheat and, Fertile Crescent, and that sort of thing. It's all based on annual grasses. So in order to farm, number one, we need the right kind of tools to not only plant, but also to harvest and grind and do the things we need to do. But also we immediately become sedentary. We go from mobile hunter-gatherers to be a farmer. Even then, you had to prepare the fields, you had to plant the seeds, you had to protect the crops, you had to harvest the crops, you had to, dry the seeds, and then, watch that resource all year round. And then, so you weren't moving anymore, and the toolkit changes. So that's why we have the Neolithic. What changes at that moment is we go from dozens if not scores of different animals in our diet on a yearly basis, and the entirety of that animal that whole time, and probably hundreds, to be honest, of different plants in our diet, a massive amount of diversity. We're focused. The diet is now focused on 1 or 2 annual grasses. I mean, 80 to 90, and in some cases, 100% of the diet are annual grasses. It's a massive overnight change, and with that, we lose all sorts of nutrients, and the toxins skyrocket, right? So we have that issue. We go from probably in ketosis, if not all the time, most of the time, to being carb addicted, like literally overnight. But what also changes is we become distanced. Some of us become distanced from our food for the first time ever. For millions of years, it was either, you either got everything that you ate, or somebody in your family or your clan hunted or foraged or dug every single piece of food that goes into your mouth. And now, when I remember in 8th grade, Mr. Schumann saying how amazing the agricultural revolution was, because for the first time ever, some people got freed from the burden of having to go get their own food, and now they could become poets and musicians and politicians and all these things. And some of that, not the political part, but the other part is all really good, amazing things, right? But it comes at a cost. Those people are getting separated from their food. For the first time ever, putting links into a food chain. So we go from gatherers to scavenger gatherers to hunter gatherers to now at the agricultural revolution, we become food producers. So some of us are producing food for a lot of other people. The next biggest change is at the industrial revolution in the 1700s, where most of the world goes from being food producers to food consumers. And we're still there now, but on this major level with this massively long food chain. And I think, not only did the diet change, but our access to food and food knowledge changed. And I see huge issues with that.
Well, now we have the government, the science, the medical industry. Someone's telling us what's the right food to eat. Did they really do that because they want to take advantage of us? Or is it really, if we look back at our food scarcity that has happened for eons and not far back, and it's still happening in some places, that our interest was how do we help people, but unknowingly we became the herder and herders of humanity.
I like to hope that most people involved in even bad decisions are not doing it for as evil purposes as we think they are. I'm sure some of them are. But I think a larger problem is when you control the food, you control literally everything. You didn't have that kind of control before the agricultural revolution. In fact, there is no evidence. Now, people killed people in the past through time. There's no evidence of organized warfare before the agricultural revolution. You didn't need it, right? I mean, one of the things I used to do when I was teaching one of my anthropology classes is I put a couple of squares on the board, and each square represented the same amount of land. And I was guessing, and this all depends on where you are, right? But let's say it's 1 square mile, each one, right? As a hunter-gatherer, 1 square mile in a really amazing, lush environment, like say the Northwest coast of America, somewhere that just has amazing resources, right? Maybe that 1 square mile on a yearly basis could support, 4 people, right? Whatever. And so your clan had 20 people, and you had your range was about 5 square miles on a yearly basis in order to keep everyone well fed. And right now, this is all wild plants, wild animals that are used to fluctuations in seasonality and change, all these other sorts of things, and very diverse. And you don't have diseases wiping through whole things. And if a disease did wipe through one of your resources, you have 400 other resources. It's not a very big deal. And if something happened, like if one of those square miles got hit by a tornado or a flood or something devastating, you take your 20 people and you move a little bit further to the south, another mile, and you're absolutely fine. It's not a very big deal. When we start farming, we start taking that same square mile of land and intensively cultivating it. Somebody could teach us in a history class, like I said, Mr. Schumann did, and teach it in a very positive way, but I'm going to do it in a very negative way. We start farming, and now all of a sudden we're we're relying on that 1 square mile to support 100 people, right? Because we're intensively cultivating it, and it's 100 people. So now 100 people are subsisting all year round on this terrible food anyhow, but they're eating it. And the reason we focused on annual grasses is because you can harvest them, store them, protect them, and you control everybody, right? So you now have control of the one food resource that everybody's eating for the entire year. And now you start getting, complex stratifications in society. You start getting governments. You start getting religion in ways that we never had religion before, and all these crazy things that are happening. And then something goes wrong. What happens when that field that supports 100 people gets the flood, or it's because it's one crop, it gets the disease or the pest? You can't go and move a mile south because you spent all year dealing with that field. You have 100 hungry mouths that you're trying to feed that are starving. So what do? You go fight your neighbor and you go steal their food, right? So there's all kinds of things that we take for granted today in society that are a direct result of intensive agriculture that started 12 to 15,000 years ago that we never had before.
You've traveled the world and learned much and shared it in your books, and tribes like the Hadza and other indigenous tribes. What did you learn from them? And is their way of thriving, surviving, existing even going to continue?
Tell me that last part again. I don't understand what you mean.
Well, meaning that all of us are so attracted to this modern Mecca, and that, we would like these things to stay, but ultimately, does it make any sense, or is it any reality that because most of us are not running to go to the farm and work the land, why would we think the people that were once us would continue that way? Or is there something that we can do because there's more fences and the cities are growing, the lands that are required to sustain the indigenous peoples and their ancient ways is going away? What can we do? I'm just looking a little bit just for the story. What's happening? Is there something we can do to help us maintain more of an indigenous lifestyle, even though we're not living on the land as they have?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, 100%. So first off, my entire family has spent a lot of time traveling the world, living and working with indigenous groups, cooking together, feeding each, sharing food. It's been absolutely amazing. It's like an entire PhD on top of the PhD that I have. These experiences, amazing people all over the world. One of the things that is very interesting about it, and somebody like Mary Ruddick would tell you the same thing, who does very similar work. She's absolutely amazing. The lands that these people are on are nowhere near as rich as they were in the past. So you have the Hadza hunter-gatherer, oldest hunter-gatherer group in the entire world. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. I mean, they're still walking around with homemade bows, and they carry 3 to 4 arrows with them all the time with a different tip. They don't go hunting. Like I go hunting. My son and I go hunting all the time. We get up in the morning, we get a cup of coffee. It's deer season. We go to the deer stand. We go hunting. They don't go hunting. They hunt all the time. Like they're always hunting. It can be in the morning. So what they do is they carry these arrows, and each one has a different tip. This one's for a bird. This one's for this. This one's for this. So depending on what comes in front of them, they pick the arrow and shoot it. It's brilliant. But they're still struggling as well because they're not on the same land that they used to be on. There's a reason why every major city in the world has a ton of archaeology underneath it, depending on where you are in the world, either thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, because that's a great place to be, right? So as modern life and cities expand and expand and expand and expand, it continues to push indigenous and traditional groups to other lands. So there's still a massive amount of information that they have that can help us with the way that we feed ourselves and interact with one another, interact with the world, all these things. But we have to understand that they have been majorly impacted from modern life as well. But to fully answer your question, I have spent a lot of my life trying to do exactly what you're talking about. Like I have a drive to be as primal as I can possibly be. When I did the show for National Geographic, The Great Human Race, I came really, really close. I mean, we literally lived from 2.5 million years ago to 4,000 years ago in the same places that our ancestors were living, using only the same tools. And it was brilliant. But you don't have, what I found is you don't have to go to those great lengths, I think, to get 80, 90% of the way there. I wholeheartedly believe one of the best things that we can possibly do is go hunting. And it can be with a 20 gauge shotgun and Cabela's like camo. That's not the point. The point is getting out, and you don't even have to kill anything. Getting out and experiencing that connection, removing links from your food chain and having that literally visceral connection to your environment and your food, where you're away from the air conditioning and you're getting bit by mosquitoes and you're watching the sun come up and the woods come alive, and hopefully doing it with somebody else near you. That is some of the most special memories of my life are that. And you have to do it every day. Hunting a couple of times a year, incredible way to reconnect. I still hunt with stone points and homemade bows here. I gun hunt as well, but I hunt with all homemade equipment as well. I mean, that is a step a little bit further, which is great. But fishing, crabbing, clamming, and I'll tell you, even for this is going to sound very weird, but even for carnivores, I do a lot of foraging tours every year, and a lot of people take them from all walks of life. And my favorite one that I do is literally in Washington, D.C. We urban forage through Washington, D.C. And it's not about like getting all these plants that you're going to eat. It's about connection. And if you're a carnivore and you take, it's going to make you be even better carnivore, because you're going to understand, one of the things we go over is this plant has this toxin, this plant has this toxin, this plant is dangerous for this reason, this plant, and you at least connect with your environment at a level that's different than sitting there watching TV. So hunting, fishing, crabbing, clamming, and foraging, I think, are some of the most accessible ways to do that, to create the kind of connection you're talking about. Secondly, and this is also, I think, very, very, very important, what you can do in your kitchen. And I know it's in your house and in your air conditioning, the whole thing, but what you can do in your kitchen can really help make that connection as well. And if you're carnivore, start butchering, like literally start butchering and grinding your own meat. I mean, one of the things we don't have in our modern kitchens anymore are things that look like animals. Like, most people don't bring bones into their house. They don't see, kids don't see something that looks like a chicken or a half of a pig. They don't see skin. They don't see feathers. They don't see hair. I mean, so even if you are a hardcore carnivore, there's a couple of steps you can take without even stepping out of your house that can help create some of those connections as well.
You mentioned the Great Human Race for National Geographic. What was that like, and what did you come away really learning from that?
It was a whirlwind to even get ready for that. It came out of nowhere. I had a message in January that I found in my junk box. It was from a casting director. And then that was January. We did what we call a chemistry test in February in the mountains of, actually it was mountains of North Carolina in the middle of the snow. We did this filming thing for a day or a couple of days. And then in May, I was in Tanzania. It came out of nowhere. The premise of the show was, there was 10 episodes. Each episode was a time in our evolutionary past when something important happened. We made a tool, we did a thing, something that allowed us to take another step from an evolutionary perspective. My job was to make all the tools from that time period, and then we would live and use only those tools to feed ourselves and protect ourselves and do all the things. And then now, to be fully honest, in each place, we were only living that way for about 10 days. Like, we only filmed for about 10 days in each place. But 10 days is still a long time to get hungry, to get scared, to, do all those things. And we, again, 2.5 million years ago in Tanzania, we went through Africa, through the Middle East. We ended up through Asia, Mongolia, and ended in Oregon at 4,000 years ago. I learned a ton. And one of the things that it taught me, and I love that, this is one of the only projects so there's National Geographic Studios, which is a television station, and then National Geographic Society, which is like the magazine and all the research and all that. This is one of the only projects where they both were working together on it. So it was brilliant. It was well thought out, well funded. And one of the things that they did was they put us with an indigenous or traditional group in that area for about a week before we started filming. And that's one of the reasons I was with the Hadza, because they wanted us to understand the environment. These are the plants you can eat. This is where the snakes live, all that sort of thing. So that was when I really had that indoctrination into the idea that there are incredible, knowledgeable, amazing people still living today in very similar ways they did in the past. And I was drawn in. So I learned a ton from all of those people, right? No matter where we were. It was, the Hadza in Tanzania, we were, Bedouins in Oman. I mean, it was awesome. But this was mind-blowing to me. So we would go and we'd film 2 episodes at a time. I was gone for about 5 weeks at a time to film 2 episodes, and I'd come home for a week, and I'd have to make all the tools and the clothes for the next thing. And then this went on for about 9 months. We would land wherever we were going to be. We'd stay in a really nice place for a night, and then we'd go live in tents with an Indigenous or traditional group wherever we were. And then we would film for 10 days. And if you watch the show, what you see on that show is what's happening. Like, we're living in a cave, we're living in whatever. There were 10 solid days of hardcore craziness. And no matter what is depicted in that episode, we were filming for 10 days. Sometimes for storyline, they made it look like 3 or 12 or whatever, but it was 10 days. And then at the end of it, they'd sweep us up and put us in a 5-star resort somewhere for 2 days. And then we'd go to, so it was really, really weird for me to be going. Then I'd be
Yeah.
So I ate a fairly healthy diet anyhow at the time, but we were episode 5. We were in Turkey, and we were in a swamp in Turkey. And my God, it was the most miserable. This one particular morning, I'm going to tell you the story of. The night before was literally the worst night I've ever spent in my entire life. We were in the swamp. I could hear the sea in the distance. And I could hear the waves, the Mediterranean. But we're in this swamp, and it was so hot. I'm sitting there sweating. We're getting covered in mosquitoes. I mean, we're just covered in mosquitoes. We had a fire, but the fire couldn't make enough smoke to keep the mosquitoes away. And I remember saying, I don't know how far this beach is, but I'm going to this beach to sleep on the beach because this is horrid. The director was out there, and he's like, you can't go anywhere. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, no, you're probably going to be there tomorrow, and we want to see your face when you see the sea for the first time. So you have to stay right here. And I'm like, well, and I hadn't eaten in like 3 days. This is miserable. So I'm sitting there, and then I looked around. I remember I had a little bit of a fire. I looked around, and I saw these beautiful millions of iridescent bluish greenish color orbs that were everywhere. And I felt like I was in a dream for a minute, like this out of body experience. This is beautiful. What is this? And then I realized they were spider eyes. I mean, everywhere. It was the worst. So the next morning, with no sleep, I'm there, and I'm miserable. And our head camera guy, his name is Luke Cormack. He's a famous DP, and he had the unfortunate job of looking through a camera lens at me, 20 hours a day, days and days and days, weeks and weeks on end. So he was well versed knowledgeable to be able to tell me what he tells me. So I'm sitting there miserable, and he looks at me, he goes, dude, I got to tell you something. I said, what? He says, I watch you day after day after day in each episode. And each episode is like a reset button. Like you go home and you eat whatever you're eating at home, or you're in the 5-star resort or whatever. But then all of a sudden you're eating this like ancient diet for days and days and days on end. He says, I see your face every time reset. And over the time that while we're filming each episode, your skin clears up, your eyes get brighter, your eyes get whiter. I just see you radiate. And he's telling me this in literally the morning after the worst night I've spent in my entire life. And it was then that I realized, he's right. Like, I'm literally eating a almost exact same diet as our ancestors were at that time period. And my body is changing, and he's seeing this change happen in only 10 days at a time, wow, which I thought was brilliant. I don't have any blood work to support it. I don't have any of that, but him looking at me.
What is that diet? What did you eat? What do you live in order for the cameraman to see that in such a short amount of time?
I think it's as much as what I did eat and also what I didn't eat, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a massive amount of meat and fat, period. Animal meat. Now, I probably even did it a little more so than maybe our ancestors even did, because we how do I say this? Every time we went to forage, we only had a very short period of time to do it, and nowhere near long enough. Foraging takes a massive amount of time, and we got stopped every time. And I said, why? Like, because foraging's boring. Nobody wants to watch foraging. So I even less plants in my diet. But it was, and I don't think it was just the food. It was also, I was into. There were except for one particular night, we didn't have any artificial lights, right? When we got up in the morning, when we went to bed, the massive amount of physical activity, when I was eating, the incredible quality of the food that I was eating, it was brilliant. It really, truly was. It was life-changing. That experience was life-changing.
You talk a little bit about more animals, less meat, and you also talk about the importance of animal fat. Can you help us understand that a little bit and why this is important to a healthy human animal?
I am convinced, not only from what you see in the archaeological record, but also from what I've seen with every single experience with any indigenous group that I've spent time with. They're eating the entire animal. They're eating all of it. And not only when we start doing that from an evolutionary perspective does everything change, but also it just clearly makes complete sense. I'll give you a great example. We were at the Hadza. The first night we were at the Hadza. And when I say more animal, less meat, I'm not suggesting we eat less meat. What I'm suggesting is we tone down a hair our focus on the meat and start using the word animal. One of the things, I've been in the restaurant world now for some time, and one thing that I hate in kitchens is they use the word protein. Hey, the protein's coming in. The protein. And when they say that, they mean meat, right? The meat, whether it's a fish or the pork shoulder or the whatever, they say the protein. And even on menus, this is the protein. Yes, it is protein. But when you do that, you're forgetting that it came from an animal, right? You're distilling this thing down to this, little, the macronutrient. So I like to use the word animal instead. And when you say animal, that means you're including everything else. We did a study years ago. It was about 11 years ago now. No, almost 14 years ago. Me and a biologist at the college and a student, it was part of her senior project. We took, this is going to blow your mind. We took 13 deer. To preface this, in the American grocery store, about half of a pig by weight, 55% of a pig and 50% of a cow end up in the grocery store shelf. The other gets wasted or used for dog food or for other things. But as far as food from that animal, almost half of it end up in the grocery store shelf, half. And we're responding to a couple different things in the study. But what we did was took 13 white-tailed deer, because hunters typically keep the same cuts that they see in the grocery store, right? Too. So we took 13 white-tailed deer, males and females, different ages, weighed them, meticulously took every bit of every part of it apart, and took all the meat that the hunter typically keeps and put it aside. We didn't even account for the meat. Put the meat over here. We ate it, but we put it over here. What we did was we took every bit of marrow out of every bone. We got a caloric representation of all the marrow, all the bone grease, all the fat, the liver, the heart, all the organs, the blood, the testicles, the eyes, the brain, all of it. And we figured out how many calories are typically left in the field by an average hunter. This is a white-tailed deer. It's nowhere near as big as a cow, a white-tailed deer. Guess how many days worth of food are typically left in the woods by a typical hunter? 13 to 31 days. 31 days. And it was almost half of that animal. So half of it was it's the same sort of percentages as the cow and the pig, right? Half of it was in flesh, half of it was in all the other pieces. So what was crazy is that not only is there, and it depends on your caloric intake, from a couch potato to an Olympic athlete is what we're really looking at, 13 to 31 days worth of food. Now, if we look at the quality of that nutrition, now meat is incredible. Don't get me wrong, but there was more nutrition in what was left behind than the parts that were taken. So from a nutritional perspective, eating the entire animal makes a lot of sense. from an ethical perspective, from a sustainability perspective, from a economic perspective, across the board, it makes complete sense. We just have to get out of our own way. I was just in Spain 2 weeks ago teaching a French charcuterie class at the Artisan School of Food, and we spent the entire week making amazing food out of organs and blood and skin and tongue, and it would have blown your mind. So when I say animal, I mean the entire animal. Every place that I've been, everybody that I've worked with, in most cases, don't eat the gallbladder, although there was a couple that do. But other than that, just about everything else is truly consumed.
Milk and our consumption of milk. What should we do about that? Because is it healthy for us or is it unhealthy? Is pasteurized better or worse? Is homogenized and all this low fat milk system we're in? When we were with you at Hack Your Health, you were teaching about how to make cheese,
right,
and how important that is, and the sourdough bread also. What are some things we could learn from, one, fermentation, and two, how we can appropriately consume mammal milk?
I have never seen a traditional diet that isn't based in fermentation, or fermentation will play a core role in it. Fermentation is at the core of every traditional diet I've ever seen. So like we mentioned earlier, if you want to take steps towards that reconnection to the past and just, increased health on every level and understanding of your food, removing food links from your food chain, fermentation is a great place to start. Fermentation is magical in what it can do, from not only detoxifying things to unlocking nutrients to increasing flavor and aroma and texture and shelf life and all of these things. I mean, it is an amazing, amazing tool. And milk is a great example. So I am a huge advocate of raw milk. I am a stronger advocate of raw milk, and I am a stronger advocate of fermented raw milk, period. I'm not even going to talk about homogenized milk or low fat milk. They're not even in my periphery. Raw milk is a fantastic food, but humans, all mammals, outgrow the ability to efficiently and safely digest milk, like in ways that they did when they were infants, right? So when all mammals are weaned, we start to lose that ability. Now, from one of the things most of us lose is the ability to digest lactose and produce the enzyme lactase, although 30 to 40% of adult humans have a genetic mutation that allows us to do that. But there's other things that happen inside of our guts when we ferment dairy from our mothers. And that's what we do. All baby mammals ferment dairy. It's part of the digestive process. We actually make cheese in our stomachs. We do, goats do, whales do, all mammals do. So one of the things that we can do as humans, and I love dairy. I have dairy in my diet every single day, is replicate what we did as infant humans inside of our bodies. We can do it as adults outside of our bodies. And we can do that by making things like kefir or yogurt or cheese, really high quality, amazing cheese, or clabber. There's a whole bunch of traditional dairy fermentations from around the world. There's several things that happen when you ferment dairy. One of the things that happens is that the lactobacillus bacteria eat lactose, the sugar that's in the milk, and that lactose level drops because of that fermentation. So most traditional dairy fermentations are lactose free by the time that they're done, and those that aren't are a much lower level of lactose. That's why if you're lactose intolerant, you can usually eat a genuine hard traditional cheese or a real yogurt or something like that. The other thing that's very, very cool about traditional dairy fermentations, especially those that happen at room temperature, and that's very important. Room temperature dairy fermentations are what we call mesophilic fermentations. Well, room temperature up to about 100 degrees. They are one of the best sources of K2 in the world for humans. So butter from a grass-fed cow has some K2 in it. Fermented butter from a grass-fed cow or even a grain-fed cow has even more K2 in it than the other butter did. It's an amazing thing. So mesophilic yogurts, fermented butter, clabber, genuine real cottage cheese. If it's made real, it's very hard to find commercially. These are some of your best sources in your entire diet of K2, which we know is incredibly important for telling calcium where it needs to go, and a ton of other things, and helping with vitamin D. So the other thing that's crazy that I don't know if people understand this, there's only two groups in the world, traditional groups in the world that I know of that drink milk. I mean, we all drink milk, right? The entire world drinks milk, right? Not most of the world. There's only two traditional groups that I'm aware of that drink milk. One is the Samburu and one is the Maasai. And they drink blood and milk every single day. Raw milk with blood mixed into it. We were with Samburu in Kenya drinking. It was an amazing experience. But our entire infrastructure for dairy around the world and all of our laws that dictate what we can and can't do with dairy are based on a very weird thing: liquid milk. Liquid milk was never a thing in the past. We have been drinking milk from other animals for at minimum 8,000 years. At minimum. Some people are suggesting closer to 40,000 years. At 8,000 years worth of time, when we consumed dairy from another animal, it was in a fermented state. We had no refrigeration. We had no pad. We didn't do any of those things. Milk as soon as it comes out of a mother is in the process of fermenting. You don't even have to touch it. It will ferment and create things like clabber and all these other things. We have an entire infrastructure based on trying to keep milk liquid and not ferment and then ship it all over the world. And then we have low-fat milk and 2% milk and homogenized milk and pasteurized milk and ultra-pasteurized milk and all these laws, and everybody's fighting about this milk. Everybody's fighting about a thing that really shouldn't be a thing. If you want to consume dairy in the healthiest possible way, and as far as I'm concerned, in the most delicious way as well, high quality, real cheeses, real yogurt, especially if they're fermented at room temperature, and kefir.
If you're going to eat a plant or a plant product, I mean, I agree with you, by the way, you either eat animals or plants. Proteins and carbohydrates don't technically exist in the way we think they do. You either eat plants or animals, except for highly refined sugars, which include flours, technically, because they're highly refined sugars. Which plant would you, and how to prepare it, do you eat? Or would you suggest, hey, this is okay, it's less toxic and some amount? I always say I eat some French fries, no skin, tallow, twice fried, and dipped in sour cream, raw. That's the best.
Very nice. Very nice. I can send you a link to this for the show notes if it's helpful. I did some research on potatoes in Bolivia and Peru, where I was in the location where potatoes were first domesticated almost 10,000 years ago. I spent a lot of time down there working on detoxifying potatoes, which have a lot of issues with them. Two things, and they're really long stories, so I'm not going to tell you the stories, but I'll tell you two takeaways. Number one, every single potato for the entire time I was in South America that I saw prepared, except for one instance. And I was in the Altiplano of Bolivia. I was in the Andes in Peru. I was with Quechua families and Amaro family. I was in the cities. I was in literally 2 years after I was there, Restaurant Central became number one restaurant in the entire world. I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere with this Amaro family and in the best restaurant in the world. Every single instance, everybody peeled the potato. Every single person peeled the potato except for once. And I asked everybody, and in multiple languages, why do you peel the potato? And the answer was always the same. That's where all the poison is. Most of the toxins in a potato are in the skin, and it makes complete sense. Remember, it's a protective mechanism. Those toxins aren't just there to be there to protect this very important part of the plant. It's the barrier between the outside world and so if you do nothing else, peel the potato. That's number one. The second thing is potatoes are loaded with toxins. Now, the native potatoes that we were working with were even much more toxic than the russets and other things in the grocery stores here. But those same toxins do still exist. They're just at lower levels. Mm-hmm. When a potato is stored in properly, and potato is not dead. A potato is dormant. You can cut up a potato and put it in the ground and it makes a new plant. So the potato is actually still in the process of protecting itself, even when it's sitting in your cellar. If it has access to light, especially, it will start to boost up some of the nasty, nasty toxins that are on the inside, and you'll see a tinge of green on the potato. Yep. If you see a tinge of green on the potato, throw the entire potato out. It is not worth eating. And listen, the green thing isn't the problem. The green thing is an indicator that entire potato is terrible. Don't like scrape off the green thing and then go eat it. Get rid of it. Don't feed it to your pigs. Just get rid of that potato. It is a nasty, nasty, problematic thing. We ferment all our potatoes at home and at the restaurant. We put it in a 2.5% salt solution, ferment them to a pH of below 4.2, and then we make French fries and potato chips and all these things with them. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But I'm going to tell you this one piece. Every other vegetable ferment that we do, like sauerkraut, we do a lot of sauerkraut. We do fermented carrots. We do all these fermentations downstairs in the restaurant. Every one of those, I would drink the juice of. Like, it's gorgeous. I mean, the thing is loaded with probiotics. It's amazing. It tastes good. It smells good. When we ferment the potatoes, what comes out of those potatoes, we actually don't do it when customers are in here anymore. We don't even open it up. It is one of the nastiest smells. It's horrible. You can't look at it. You can't smell it. You have to get rid of it. We wash the potatoes. It's nasty. Potatoes are a nasty, nasty thing unless they're dealt with in general, but they're dealt with properly. Another small example, just because we're talking. One of the things when I was in Bolivia with the one family I was living with, and we were in the middle of nowhere, way above the tree line. We're at like 16,000 feet. Beautiful, amazing family. They were processing quinoa, and quinoa, the superfood, the whole thing everybody talks about, right? And I didn't realize how much processing goes into the quinoa before it even comes to the grocery store shelves. But they said, so quinoa, one of the things that quinoa is problematic in it, the toxin is they're loaded with saponins. Mm-hmm. They actually scrape the quinoa seeds to scar them, and then they put them through these washes. But they said the first wash of the quinoa is what they use to wash their clothes. The saponins. It's so loaded with saponins. I mean, these are some nasty, nasty things that I don't, and people listening to this have already decided to eat meat, I'm sure, but I don't eat hardly any plants without processing them first. I do like a potato. We do a fermented potato. We actually fry in lard here, but fried in lard, absolutely. With a little vinegar.
History professor, PhD in anthropology, and now you decided to open up a restaurant. Tell us a little bit about the restaurant, Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and what your favorite meal there is, and what your customer's favorite meal is.
That's a great question. So when I was teaching at the college, I taught at Temple University and Monmouth University, and more recently Washington College. And I taught at Washington College for 13 years. And while I was there, I was realizing throughout this time how central food is to all the research that I was doing, which meant it was central to all the teaching that I was doing. And we didn't have a teaching kitchen at the college. Our home is 7 miles away from the college. So what we did was, anytime a restaurant went out of business, we bought whatever we could afford. And we built a commercial kitchen in our basement. And we did this for teaching. So the students were at our house literally every day, which is great. But we have 3 kids of our own. It got to be a little much after a while. So I ended up, I'll do the short version of this. I ended up writing about 8 or 9 years ago. I wrote, and I got $1 million grant from the state. My wife found $1 million private match. And that was the seed to start a center that was part of the college called it was called the Eastern Shore Food Lab. And the intent was that, and it's the space we're in now. The intent was that it was a place where students and the community could connect with their food, their health, their environment, their past, all these things, right? And we did a ton of programming until COVID hit. When COVID hit, everything went to hell. And I had no budget and I had no students, and I was trying to be relevant. I was trying to figure out what I should do. I had no ingredients except for I had thousands of pounds of flour. Now, I know everybody still listen to this, even if you're not eating bread. There was, at the beginning of COVID, there was a local social action committee that was donating bags. I live in a very rural area, donating bags of food to families in need. And they were putting bags of, Wonder Bread in these bags of food. And I said, well, I can at least make sourdough. And there's no biological requirement for bread in the human diet. There are some emotional and cultural requirements for bread. If you're going to eat bread, true, genuine, wild, long fermented sourdough is your best option. So I at least knew I could do better than what was going into these bags. So my oldest daughter was a sophomore in high school. We're, again, very beginning of COVID. Every week we baked 100 to 120 loaves of bread and donated it to this social action committee, donated to families in need until we ran out of flour. closed the doors, went home. This is months. And then our oldest daughter wanted to start a sourdough bread company, which we did out of our home in COVID. And we had this commercial kitchen at home and a wood-fired oven in the backyard. And then when COVID was starting to relax, we tried to bring it all back in here, and it wasn't going to happen. So I left the college. But at this point, I realized the power of traditional ancestral approaches to food and how it transformed my health and my family's health. And my wife and I were committed. We're like, we are going to create a space where we can teach people to cook like this at home, and we can actually make the food for the community as well. So we had to give the $2 million back. We gave the $2 million back, and we took this huge leap. My book had just sold, and we took this huge leap, and we didn't even know if it was going to support the two of us, but it has become a destination. We are so dedicated to what we're doing, and I'll just give you a quick example of what we do here. So number one, my wife and I sat down at the very beginning of this. We had no idea what this was going to be, but we did know how committed we were to our approaches to food. And we put a piece of paper down and we wrote down in front of one another. We brainstormed. These are all the things we're always going to do with food and all the things we're never going to do with food. So for example, we would never use any refined sugars. Any bit of grains would be fully fermented using a wild, long fermented sourdough. We have a nose to tail approach to animals. Any grains, nuts, seeds, or legumes would be either sprouted, soaked, nixtamalized, and or fermented. We had this whole list of things. Mm-hmm. And we only strayed on one thing since then because we're a little naive on this one thing. But in order to make the food that we believe in, we also had to have a true scratch approach. Now, restaurants say the word scratch all the time. It's kind of been bastardized like farm to table and all these other things. Well, there are no two ingredients put together outside of our walls. Everything we make 100% in-house. We butcher all of our animals. We make all of our cheese. We make all of our sourdough bread. Everything. So if you come and get a simple sandwich, every single bit of that has been made entirely in-house. If you get mayonnaise on it, we make like 8 gallons worth of mayonnaise with avocado oil every single week. I mean, it's so, and we didn't know if it was gonna stick, but it has. And this is what we found, and this is a really cool sort of result of this. As you can imagine, our labor costs are off the charts. We have 34 people working now in just 5 years because it takes that much manpower to actually make this food and make it properly. But our food costs, so our labor costs are much higher than a typical restaurant, but our food costs are lower because all the value add is happening in our place. So the added benefit of this is if you come and buy something from us, like you order a meal and you pay for it, that money most of that money is actually going to the people that live in the community that are working here, right? It's actually going to these people that are invested in helping make it, not somebody around the world and not the Cisco truck driver or whatever. It's actually going to the people that are actually working here. And we're really, really proud of that. So you need to come though. You actually need to make a trip.
I'm going to be there. I'm working on it this spring for sure. The importance of culture and community and food, that's who we are as humans in so many ways. Mm-hmm. We don't go sit in a room and eat our food alone and have it delivered, which is kind of what's happening in our world today. What have you found in cultures and societies and our health and longevity in your exploration?
I'll give you one quick example. We did research in Sardinia 2.5 years ago. And we were actually doing some cheese research and some other things, but we ended up in Villa Grande, which is on the east coast of Sardinia. It turns out it was the first blue zone ever identified. I didn't even mean to do it. We found out we were actually there and the importance of it. I can tell you from experience that from a dietary perspective, and most people know this by now, this plant forward approach to the blue zones is exactly the opposite of what every single group that's been identified in a blue zone, except for the Loma Linda folks, are actually eating. A meal didn't go by where meat and fat weren't center stage in Sardinia. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was the exact opposite. But to your point, every single thing, other thing, because food is one factor in things like longevity and health, right? Everybody was incredibly active. I mean, there were a massive amount of people over 100 years old, and they were walking up and down the mountain every single day. I mean, it was unbelievable. So the amount of exercise, and nobody there we saw would have won a bodybuilding contest. Like, it wasn't that, right? Everybody was fit though. Everybody was lean. Everybody was happy and smiling. Everybody was moving all the time. They were incredibly connected to their food. And they were nice. I asked somebody, the family we were staying with, I said, okay, I know this is cliche. What's the secret? Like, literally, what's the secret? You know, everybody comes here and says, what's the secret? And she said, we're nice. I said, come on, seriously. She goes, no, we're actually nice. And I think there's something to that.
I just have an interesting question that came up in eating dirt. Is that a thing for humans? Is it valuable? I don't know. It came up in something I was looking at.
Absolutely. Autophagy, the intentional consumption of earth. It was classified as a eating disorder for so many years. And for some people it is. I mean, everybody is chewing on the pencil erasers and the lead pens and the whole thing, and paint chips are eating, yes. But the reality is animals eat dirt. Animals consume dirt. Animals consume dirt for two primary reasons. One is there are certain clays that are incredible at detoxifying. And that's one of the ways, actually, that we detoxified potatoes in Bolivia. The reason I went there was to practice something called pasa, where the most dangerous potato we ate the entire time we were there was eaten with clay. It was the most dangerous potato. It was the most toxic potato. And believe it or not, it was that one instance that I referenced earlier that we didn't peel it. And every single bite every single bite went into a bowl of this particular clay before it went into your mouth, then back in the bowl and back in your mouth, and back in the bowl, back in your mouth. And I finally said, why didn't you peel this one potato? And they said, because that clay is that amazing. So it's a detoxifier, right? And the clay will bind with the toxins and put it in a state, not all toxins, but in this particular instance, and put it in a state that your body doesn't recognize. And it'll pass through your body. The other reason is, and we see it a lot, especially in impoverished areas with pregnant and lactating women, where there's an increased mineral need, and they get that through the clay and earth.
What can we all do to understand from our ancient past how we should live today, in a nutshell, for our brothers and sisters around the globe?
I think the most important thing that we can do is recognize that we have senses for a reason and trust ourselves. I mean, it's great. The information that you put out is amazing. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me on. The reality is nobody should have to listen to this. Nobody should have to make a podcast about food in order to we are the only species on the planet that hires people to tell us what we should be eating, and we're still the most unhealthy species on the planet. The only species close to us that are as unhealthy as we are because of the way we eat are our pets. And that's because we're screwing them up the same way we're screwing ourselves up. We have senses for a reason. I am convinced that if you are faced with choices, if you're in tune with your senses and faced with choices for real food in front of you, real, genuine, nourishing food, you don't have to ask anybody or even think about when to start eating, when to stop eating, how often you should be eating. It will automatically happen. I mean, in the past, this is how it wasn't listening to somebody tell us how to eat, or a doctor, nutritionist, or the Muscle and Fitness magazine. This is how we decided what to eat. Does it look good? Does it smell good? Does it feel good? Does it taste good? And if it passes all that, then you put it in your mouth and hope for the best. I mean, that is literally the way that we have these senses, because they're helping to not only keep us alive, but helping to ensure that we're healthy enough to reproduce viable offspring. These senses are fine-tuned through millions of years of evolution to do just that. But now we have people in lab coats tweaking on those things, making Doritos and the whole 9 yards. So the number one thing I can say is trust your senses. But in order to do that properly, you need to be able to put nourishing food in front of you.
And there's a human ancestral story that you tell in your book, Eat Like a Human, and you share in your methods at your restaurant, which is Modern Stone Age Kitchen in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And the simplest thing I think you shared here is be nice.
100%.
Be nice. Yes. Really appreciate you being here today, Bill, and you've given some amazing time with me. We look forward to seeing you at your restaurant this spring for sure, because we've been following you. I know the reading your book is excellent, and you're inspiring so many of us. Get back to our ancient path of our brothers and sisters that taught us much, and slow it down.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure, and I can't wait to see you when you come here. And I think we're going to be at the same events coming up in the spring as well.
Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we spoke about and you shared with our community?
Actually, yeah, there's one thing. So we have the restaurant, the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and one thing to keep in mind is our focus, our mission here with the kitchen, with the restaurant, is to transform familiar food into its most nourishing form possible. So somebody who's carnivore can come here and easily find something to eat. Somebody who's keto can come here and easily find something to eat. But so can their spouses or partners or kids as well, because we make very familiar food as absolutely nourishing as it can be. So we can cater to everybody. We have the nonprofit, the Modern Stone Age Food Lab, which is the room that I'm in here. We have a teaching kitchen here. Every weekend we're home. We do at least one class, in-person class. So we do everything from butchering classes to fermentation classes, foraging classes, all these things. But there's something I'm really excited about that I want to mention very quickly. Several months ago, we did start an online community because people were asking, I couldn't get here. It's called the Ancestral Table. And every Monday, we come together at noon and we do a live class, a cooking class on a different topic, a short piece, about a half an hour. It's professionally recorded. We put it up into a library, so you don't have to be there. You can pull it down anytime you want. And then we do live Q&A afterwards and interact all week long. It is a great group of people from around the country that are very focused on nourishing themselves, cooking from scratch, butchering, fermenting, making cheese, doing all those things. So if you come here, we'd love to have you in class. We would love to nourish you in our restaurant, but you can also access us online as well.
I always love to watch cooking shows.
Yeah.
What is it about the human mindset that we just are fascinated to watch people cook?
Did you see that? You know, in the food TV, I used to love Alton Brown. My God, did I love Alton Brown. And I used to watch Julia Child when I was really little. They did a study about 10 years ago when food TV was like really at its height. And they said the average American home watched people cooking 80% more than they actually cook themselves, or something like that. They were actually watching it more than they were actually doing it. I forget the number.
Well, maybe it's back to even just watching our community around the fire and the outdoor kitchen, whatever it was. Seeing that and sensing it probably brings something about knowing where our real sustenance come from. We either hunted, we gathered, and then we're communing together, and that community I think is really important. And again, I think the stories that you're sharing, and we're going to put a link to your kitchen and also your non-for-profit, because I think it's really important that we all invest in our communities that we want to see and continue. And really going out to a restaurant is still a powerful communal and family event that is all related, I say, to reproduction. It's all about families and building families. And, first dates, I was even talking, I was just sharing with someone a first date and what restaurant, and my Valentine's, I'm going out to a restaurant. This is just still part of our culture. So we'll keep on sharing and communing together. And again, Bill, thank you so much. This has been really an amazing hour and a half with Bill. I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of Eat Like a Human and visit Bill at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. I'm planning on being there this spring, and hopefully he'll let me hang out with him in the kitchen directly in Maryland. And remember, your health is in your hands. And often it starts with getting back into the kitchen and treating your body like the master instrument it is. This has been an hour of power plus of Kiltz's Keto. So we want to invite everyone in Carnivore Conversations. Stay well, stay fueled in our ancient master meals. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and share, and keep telling us what you think would improve your life.